LSU reports tomorrow on the field Friday. Let's start with offseason expectation. Everybody that we've talked to, it seemed to be high on LSU, and for me, I say that the reason why people have this type of confidence in LSU going into the season all centers around Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And obviously, I guess the two of the big storylines are always going to be Burrow and then also Joe Brady in this new offense. But those two things are pretty much tied together. So I mean, I would definitely agree with that. And I don't know, when I'm deciding what to think of Joe Burrow, I think the only way you can really fairly judge him is those last 4 or 5 games when he finally had an offense that seemed to make a little more sense around him. And we saw him be a dual threat quarterback. We saw him complete 67% of his passes and whatnot. So I don't know. I think he showed in those games, while still taking a beating, man, what his upside is. And obviously, he's not a perfect quarterback. There are guys with stronger arms and things like that. He can work on some decision-making things. But I think he proved his upside in those games. And if you put a better offense around him, I'm just really interested to see, how much those numbers can improve.
How concerned are you about this offensive line going into camp?
Yeah, I don't foresee this getting drastically better this year. I mean, I think the interior of the line is going to be, pretty solid. I don't think it's going to be amazing or anything like that, but that'll be pretty stable. And then those tackle spots are still major question marks. I mean, your options at right tackle right now are two guys who really struggled last year in Austin Deculus and Bedard Traore, or maybe you look at Anthony Bradford there, but that's a true freshman who probably still has some weight things to figure out and whatnot. So your options there aren't that great. And then Sadiq Charles, that's the one thing I'll say, okay, yes, I do think Sadiq Charles will improve this season. I think those injury things really did hurt him last year and whatnot and a bunch of other things. So I do think he'll take a step, but does that step mean he's suddenly one of the better left tackles in the SEC? Not necessarily. So I still have definite question marks there, but as my story said, I'm really interested to see how much this new offense and whatnot takes some of the pressure off that with quicker decisions, spread the ball out more, and maybe take some of the pressure off that was definitely put on that line last year.
Little breaking news here, Brody. We'll get back to LSU in a second, but Ian Rappaport at Rap Sheet. Let me double check that this is not a fake account. It is not a fake account. Wide receiver Michael Thomas of the Saints have reached a 5-year, $100 million extension, so it looks like Mike Thomas hit that $20 million a year number, and he's the first big wide receiver domino to fall. We'll react to that coming up. Brody, so I loved your O-line piece yesterday or whenever it was, a couple of days ago, and something that you discussed in there is how much does having returning starters actually matter? And so when you dive into the numbers, how much does it matter that LSU returns 70-plus starts?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to look at because offensive line is just the toughest area in football to quantify because it's obviously dependent, as you know, on just so many different other factors. And the stats, it's hard to tell if they're really accurate of what's really happening on the field. So it's a tough thing to really analyze. So I don't think these numbers are be-all and all numbers. But I think the evidence just shows that it's just not a drastic difference one way or the other. I think you see a lot of offenses with similar, returning starts. LSU's going to return, I believe, 76. It wasn't that drastic. A lot of them took major step back. Some improved a little. I think of those numbers I showed. I think 4 of the 5 offenses went backwards in the S&P Plus, which is more of an overall metric of your offense. I just don't think. Would I argue that sure, an offensive line's probably going to get better with more experience? Of course, I'm not that naive. I'm more just saying that I don't think it's definitely some signifier of dramatic improvement.
Talking to Brody Miller, now covers LSU for The Athletic, does really good work. Brody, if you had to choose a position group or just a facet of this team that you think people aren't as concerned about as they should be, is there anything that kind of comes to the forefront?
There's no dramatic one, really. I genuinely think this is a relatively stable team, but I guess the one I'd have to go with is defensive line, I guess, off the top of my head, because it's one where you know what you're getting. You're bringing so much back and whatnot. But, Rashard Lawrence, he's somebody who, he's always a little banged up a little bit. You're never going to be too confident that he's going to be 100%. And then you got Braden Fehoko who's coming off a torn bicep. And, you got Glenn Logan who, is pretty average for most of the season and the end of the year on a really good note. You got a freshman and a guy with weight problems as your main nose tackle option. So I just think that's a group where there is some question marks, even though it seems stable because of the returning production. I definitely there's some room for improvement there and some reason to maybe be skeptical.
Brody, give me one rookie to watch going into camp, or a couple of rookies that you got your eyes on that could make impacts here early on.
Well, I think the chief answer is Apuaika. I mean, I think that's definitely the most exciting one to watch, just because he seems so advanced for a freshman defensive lineman. But I feel like that's a cheat code. So I'll go with Marcel Brooks as the other one I'll go with. He's somebody who can play that quarter position, that safety or linebacker hybrid that Grant Delpa and Jacoby Stevens have had a lot of success with, and just the staff raves about Marcel Brooks. So he's somebody I definitely would be really interested to see how much of an impact he can make as a freshman. He might not even make the field that much, but I really am excited to see what he's capable of there.
Seem to be hearing good things about Trey Palmer coming out of the summer.
Absolutely. He was actually my next choice I was thinking about. He's somebody that definitely seem really excited about. And that's going to be an interesting one to follow, just because they do have so much depth there. And Mickey Joseph and Joe Brady have both said they're probably going to rotate 7-8 receivers. So he could definitely make it on the field. I'm just interested to see how many snaps are available there. But they definitely seem excited about him.
How do you see this running back group working out? Do you have a read on maybe who's in the lead going into camp?
I mean, I won't pretend I have more of a read than I do, but I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets the jump, the start there going into camp and whatnot, just because obviously he's the only really established guy there. I think he's a pretty good fit for what they seem to want to do on offense this year, with getting the receivers out to passes more and maybe even lining up in the slot sometimes and whatnot. He's a good fit there, but I mean, they've been raving about what they've seen from Tyrion Davis-Price and whatnot, and obviously John Emery has so much upside there. So I'm really interested to see, okay, how ready is Emery from day one? How much do they do some of those traditional runs with Davis-Price? And really, is it something where, okay, Edwards-Helaire is to start early, but then maybe one of those freshmen takes it over the course of the season? I'll be honest, I don't have a great read there, but going into it, I would assume Edwards-Helaire has that for now.
Brody, you're a big numbers guy. Would you pay a wide receiver $20 million a year?
Now, it's hard to argue Michael Thomas deserves that. If anyone does, he would be it. But personally, I'm not somebody who believes in paying receivers $20 million a year. It's the same reason why I don't agree with the Saquon Barkley pick with the Giants last year. I just think there's certain positions that are easier to find value with cheaper players. So I just think that's tough. But what do I know? I don't run an NFL team for a reason.
It is weird, like the element in all of this, because, Brody, I think a lot of people from a strict take emotion out of it stance agree with you. But like you do as a GM, you have to let other players see that if you perform, that you will get paid. So it's like it's almost, you almost can't be married just to that heartless roster building, I guess. It's a very tough spot for Loomis to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I think it's a good way to put it, because if you let him go, I mean, you really can't replace Michael Thomas. As much as I said that's a position that historically you can replace, you can't replace Michael Thomas. So he is worth probably paying, X amount more than you'd feel comfortable, just because the overall value he's going to have on your offense. But I'm just a believer, and I love looking at things like the Philadelphia Eagles, the way they build their team, where they're just throwing so much of their money in the trenches, and that's how they built this team. And that's why, I mean, the Eagles are going to be one of the best teams this year. I think if you put your money at quarterback in the trenches, and there seems to be, and the Rams are another good example of that. And I think evidence shows those teams do well.
Yeah, you got to have that quarterback, man. You got to have that rookie quarterback contract.
Really. Well, that's definitely helped the Rams, Seattle,
for sure. Okay, Brody, we'll see you at the Rotary Room, man. Thank you for the time this morning.